So our next stage item, we're going to talk about bipartisanship, what's going on in DC, and how we can, again, continue to work together for that quest for a common ground. So I have joining me for this segment, Mr. Jerome Vaughn of WDET FM. Glad to have you joining us again. And Congresswoman Kristen McDonald Rivet from Bay City coming to hang out with us to talk about these items. So at that point, Jerome, I turn this over to you. I know there's a conversation about how many kids there are between the two of you, but it's all up to you.
Thank you, thank you. We're planning a new sitcom, dealing with kids. We were just talking about kids just before we got started here, their importance and how difficult it is to pay for them. You've just started working on a Working Parents Tax Relief Act. Let's start there, and then we'll just go on talking about kids a little more.
So the biggest joy in my life and my husband's life is being able to have those big family meals where we got all the kids around the table on Sundays, and you spend hours doing that. And the reality is those big families are really hard now. So when you bring a brand new baby home in today's world, it's going to add about $30,000 to your annual expenses. That's annually. So in my district, I represent Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, and Midland. 70% of our jobs pay less than $60,000 a year. So you think about adding $30,000 to your household expenses on take-home pay on 60 grand a year, and it seems an absolute impossibility. I think that there are a lot of things that we need to do about that, but the first thing we need to do is to think about what our tax structure looks like and who pays for what and how much of their discretionary income goes towards taxes, and start to figure out how to put more money back in people's pockets so they can pay for the expenses of kids when they're very, very little. So my team and I put our heads together and we introduced the Working Parents Tax Credit. And it's a refundable tax credit that for families who make less than $100,000 a year and who are working, so you have to work in order to qualify, you get $5,500 in refundable tax credit per child under the age of 3 every year. And that doesn't cover the full $30,000, but it is something that helps pay for those costs of diapers and formula and all of the things that make having babies really expensive.
Talk a little bit about how you came up with the germ of the idea. I mean, yes, we're both parents, and we understand some of those costs, but when was it that you first started thinking about making the transition from a thought about buying a box of cereal to families buying boxes of cereal and making it easier for them?
Early in my life, there was a moment in my life where I was a single mom with 2 kids. Amazing kids. But I'll never forget that moment, and this would have been 25 years ago, when it was a Wednesday, and my daughters wanted cereal, and I was out of milk, or had just a little bit of milk left, and I didn't get paid till Friday, and I had no money. And, adding water to that milk, trying to figure out how to make that go farther. And when I'm talking to folks in my district, particularly parents of young kids, they're in this constant battle of how do I make this money go farther? Because they're getting to the end of the month, working really hard, but they can't pay for these basic expenses. And in that moment, when I needed money for milk, what I needed more than anything was money to buy some milk. So it really started this entire path of when I'm in elected office to think about how do we put more money in people's pockets and do it in a way that honors the dignity of work, that honors the actual effort that they're putting into supporting their families. And that just gets harder and harder every year. In part because I think we've got a tax system that actually favors the uber wealthy as opposed to working families. So my tax credit is limited to households that make less than $100,000 a year. And it's built on the work that I did when I was in the state Senate, which was that I authored the Working Families Tax Credit in Michigan that and managed to get into law 2 years ago. And this is just a build on that, that helps in those moments of diapers, daycare, formula, constant purchasing of onesies. These things are really expensive when kids are little.
I was going to say, and there are a lot of costs that folks are dealing with now.
Yeah.
The cost of gas, the cost of housing, the cost of water. All of these things are burdens for families in Michigan. How are you thinking about dealing with those, or making it easier for folks to deal with those?
Yeah, there are two things that we have to think about. The first and the most important one in the long term is we have to get people's wages up. So the reality is, across our state, our wages have not kept up with the cost of things. So you know how in Michigan we all love that wintertime meal of the pot roast with the carrots and the potatoes in the slow cooker? We all do this. So my husband and I go to the grocery store, and we're trying to build this which is a really pretty cheap meal of the roast beef dinner, and a chuck roast is costing $25, which honestly we know is kind of a crappy piece of meat, right? But there's a reason why I put it in a slow cooker. When that meal, that quintessential Michigan winter meal, is costing that amount of money, but your wages haven't gone up in the same way, that is a very tangible proof point to Michigan families that things aren't working. So we have to get our wages up, and we can do that in all kinds of ways. We can support innovation. We can make a better economic climate here. We can think about our workforce and our education system. All that stuff's important. But while we work on that, we have to recognize what it's like in the right now. And I have so many people around me and daily phone calls into my office of people who are telling me they're choosing between their prescription drugs and their groceries. They're choosing between heat in their homes and gas in their car. And the important thing in the right now is to try to get more money in people's pockets while we try to get wages up across the state.
What do you think your chances are of getting things happening along that line?
Okay, so I'm just going to challenge this notion that Democrats and Republicans never talk to each other. Let's get into the bipartisan conversation. You know, I have been rated in Washington as the most bipartisan member of the Michigan delegation. And it's not because I set up and think, okay, how do I get this ringing? It's when you approach problems with a solution mindset, and you look for other people who want to just put their heads down and bring solutions across the finish line. You know, we've been able to, we worked on a bill immediately. I'm in my first term in Congress. It's been a little nutty. There's these realities of regulations and federal requirements that we put in place around eggs, the price of eggs, that mandate a disposal of a certain number of eggs for no really good reason. So we did a bipartisan bill to get that passed that lowered the cost of eggs at a time when bird flu was coming in and making the prices skyrocket. There's a way to actually seek out other people who want to get things done, who want to be serious about the work, who are not engaging in performative politics for views on TikTok, and getting things across the finish line, which is why we've been able to get 2 bills to the president's desk and signed. We've been able to write a significant portion of the surface transportation bill. We actually can get things done as a country when we have serious people who really understand how hard it is for most of the families right now, not just in Michigan, but across the country. And I seek out partnerships like that, and we're having some success.
Tell me a little bit about what those first steps are like when either you approach someone on the other side of the aisle or they approach you. Is it tentative? You already know who you want to talk to about issue A, B, or C?
You know, it's so common sense. It starts with a conversation, a hello, and a relationship. But, you know, the second day I was on the Hill, Marcy Kaptur, who's this legendary member of the Ohio delegation, she's been in Congress forever, and she sat down next to me and she showed me this spreadsheet with numbers. And she said, I want to show you where you are in a ranking of median income by congressional district. And she said to me, find the people that are closest to your district in terms of median income, because in my district that number is pretty small, right? We're kind of at the bottom of the pack. And seeking out the other members whose districts look like mine, who are worried about the same things I'm worried about. And the reality that you don't hear on the 24-hour news channels is that most people in Congress are there because they are serious about making things better. Not all of them, definitely not all of them, but most people are. And so I think if you approach policy solutions, whether we're talking about making housing more affordable, we're talking about energy solutions, or who gets what kind of tax break, and you base it in the reality of how people in your district are doing, and you find people who are in that same space, you usually can find some people to go along with you, and party actually matters second instead of first in those situations.
Say that again.
Party matters second, not first, when you're trying to find solutions for people in your district with other people whose people are in the same circumstance, right?
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down. I want to ask you just one more thing before we run out of time. We were talking earlier about pot roasts.
Yeah.
And the cost of that. Tell me about rotisserie chicken.
Oh, I want to talk about hot chicken.
You and I have had a lot of hot chicken over the years. Tell me about what you want to do about that.
Let me tell you the story. So I'm on the agriculture committee, which I really adore being on the ag committee, and we were debating SNAP. And I'm not making this up, over a decade, there has been this fight on the Hill about whether or not people who receive SNAP benefits should be able to buy hot rotisserie chicken on SNAP benefits. And, I hadn't thought to speak on this in any way, and I'm sitting there, and there's this whole debate back and forth about whether or not this is okay. And you and I know, because we both raised a million children, that you can go buy a rotisserie chicken cheaper than you can buy a roaster chicken, and it can be 30 minutes. I can give you 10 recipes off the top of my head.
Me too.
Including the famed tater tot casserole. That gets a dinner on the table in 30 minutes with a rotisserie chicken. And we wanted to say to SNAP benefits recipients that they couldn't do it. And I just said, this has got to be some kind of joke. This can't be real. This has to be some sort of joke, because this it saves taxpayer money, makes everything easier. And in the committee, they voted to table it for further consideration. And they've been working on it for 10 years. So I just led an amendment when the Farm Bill came to the floor and said, let's just let SNAP benefits buy hot chicken. And then, to be perfectly honest, my leadership whipped against it. And we rallied the troops. And we whipped the Democratic caucus, we whipped the Republican caucus to allow for hot chicken. And we managed to get it out of the House with a gigantic margin. Because the reality is, when you put those sorts of solutions, practical, common sense solutions, and you get that in front of people, they're going to go for it every time. We just have to get through the nonsense.
In the less than a minute we have left, there's this little thing in November, but besides that, what's next?
What's next? What's next for what? What's next?
For you.
My job is to get up every day and think about the people in my district who are working really hard, sometimes with 2 or 3 jobs, and can't get to the end of the month and pay their bills. And we have this gigantic coalition of people in our district who are working toward this. So we're working toward November, which is not about getting me a title or keeping my title. It's about that. So, when we are sworn in January for a second term, I will work relentlessly on that, whether I'm working with my own party or the one across the aisle, to try to deliver that for the people in Michigan.
All right, Kristen McDonald, Rivet, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Let's find some time to swap some recipes.
Yes, we will do that.
All right.
Thanks.